So what we want to talk about this evening is how racism affects social determinants of health and how historical trauma contributes to present-day health disparate inequities, and how do we address these. A lot of the work that we have done revolves around the history of how we got to where we are. So as this presentation unfolds, we'll talk a lot about that. The one thing that I think we can all agree with is that America is sick, especially right now. And from our point of view, racism is the elephant in the room. There are many things to be disturbed about, but you have to pick your spot, so this is our spot. So what we talk about is racism. The divisive rhetoric that's going around right now always encourages us to think of people as the other. And if you can otherize somebody, you can hate them. And you cannot communicate with them, and you can do awful things to them. When they send people to war, they make the enemy the other. So you want to kill Gooks, or you want to kill Japs, or you want to kill somebody. So you depersonalize them, and that makes you able to do horrific things to them. Under this banner of racism, that's only one indicator, because economic class follows very closely. And then social factors generally demonize anybody who's different. Look at the LGBT community. Anybody who is not like you. And in our situation, white supremacy has made it so that white is the default and everybody else is the other. So that's what we have to live with, and that's been built up over centuries. In particular, Black America is in crisis. And we've taken this quote from the Health Assessment and Research Project that was done right here in Santa Clara, but that kind of sums up the short version of what's happening. Racism affects virtually every social determinant of the quality of your health, the quality of your life. So from the moment you get out of bed, well, even during the night while you're dreaming, racism is this pall that hangs over you and affects absolutely everything that you do. And it is so ingrained into the structures with which we live, it's really hard to root it out and to make change.
When Sharon selected this quote, and I saw that she had done that, I said, you know you're actually going to meet the man who said these words, right? So.
And the moment we walked into the health center, there was Dr. Battle sitting right there. So it was, that really worked out. The thing that we're dealing with is a systemic inequity. There is one thing to deal with personal prejudice, where people don't like each other. It's another thing when it's baked into the system. That therefore you have the economic inequality. You have situations where the level of Black wealth is minuscule compared to the level of white wealth. We start off with so many deficits that it's virtually impossible to ever catch up. Our babies can't even reach full birth weight. Our infant mortality rates are vastly different. So starting from birth, these social determinants really have an effect on your life. Especially the health outcomes, which I just talked to everybody about. The school to prison pipeline. Our Black kids don't have a chance. 1/4 of the population in the younger age group is going to be incarcerated if they're not already. And it's almost inevitable. Everybody's family has somebody who's in jail. And then the community violence that we're seeing now. My personal feeling is that we have children now, we have a generation of children who don't have a concept of the past or the future. It is only the now, and they don't feel that their lives matter. And they're on a rampage. Where all of this emanates from is the historical harm. America is built on a foundation of many awful things. You can start with the 400 years of Native American genocide. So in order for this country to exist, Europeans settled and took over the land and killed off as many Native Americans as possible. Then you have 245 years of African slavery. Then after that, you have 100 years of Jim Crow. And then there's a continuing onslaught of racism. Whenever one system ends, when slavery ends, then Jim Crow picks up. When Jim Crow ends, then something else picks up. Slavery by another name. So there's always another system that comes to keep this system, this systemic inequity intact. One of the things that is related to the historical harm is that you have generations of people who are traumatized. And one of the best books that we have seen that discusses this, that everyone should read, is Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy, who also wrote the foreword to our book, Gathered at the Table. But these are adaptive mechanisms that have allowed us to survive in spite of the odds. African Americans are some of the most resilient people that have ever lived on the face of the earth to have survived the things that they did. Kidnapping, enslavement, dehumanization. I can look at this list, and it's like when you take the ACE test, the Adverse Childhood Experiences. This is what we and our ancestors have experienced. All of those things happened in my family. All of them. To people, mostly to people that I know living in my lifetime. That is trauma. Slavery, many people have never been willing to confront the reality of it. Slavery is at the economic foundation of this country and the Western world. It would not have been possible for this country to develop as it did without slavery, a free labor force. So slavery and capitalism very much intertwined, and the best book that we've read about that subject is The Half Has Never Been Told, which came out, I want to say, 2 years ago. But it beautifully explains how this system was built. How are these things possible? How were people able to own slaves, justify it with their churches, and do unimaginably awful things to people? Complicity is one way, and everyone was complicit. North, South, everybody. And they will tell you that it's purely a North-South issue, but it's not. I was really shocked when I got a statistic from Tom about Rhode Island. And Rhode Island's primary source of income was building slave ships. So they made money, whether they enslaved anyone or not, they still made money off of the trade. Anybody who wore cotton shirts or drank rum or smoked tobacco, they were supporting slavery. So everyone was complicit in building this system that we live in today. And they could be complicit because they were subject to something called cognitive dissonance. That means being able to hold two conflicting views about something in your brain at the same time. So you can say, slavery is evil, but I'll do it because I can make money off of it. They can justify it in some way. Thomas Jefferson could have children with a woman that he enslaved, and at the same time say that people that he enslaved were less than human. And he's the founding father of the country. A lot of people don't know that half of the delegates to the Constitutional Convention owned slaves, and that 12 of the first 18 American presidents owned slaves. It was such a fact of life. Cognitive dissonance allowed them to do that. And that leads to implicit bias. When you do over a period of time, is that you built up this ability to rationalize everything, and now it is so automatic that you just have an implicit bias. If I look at somebody who is black, if I'm a white person, I look at somebody who's black, there's automatically a feeling of fear. Women clutch their pocketbooks when they're walking down the street and they see a black guy on the same street. People cringe when black people get in elevators. This is implicit bias. It is just something that you automatically jump to a conclusion about somebody and have a normal, natural, immediate reaction. For those of you who are interested, Harvard University has done a lot of work in this area, and the website that's presented there, you can go and take these tests online. And they were really interesting to me because implicit bias works in a lot of ways. So if I see a picture of a white person, I immediately feel fear. Probably in the same way that they feel fear when we get on elevators. But these tests will help you do that. And they're like really instant, and you'll be shocked at the results. So do them, and there are lots of them. So you can see what your biases are for many different types of people.
And you know, you can just Google Harvard
Right.
implicit bias if you don't get the address just right. It's the coolest. It's like a video game for getting smarter about yourself.
Right.
It's really cool. Okay,
Oh,
you can't see this, but what this is a representation of that sort of unconscious bias on the Family Feud.
Hosted by Steve.
That's Steve Harvey and two women who are about to answer a question. So the woman on the left is African American, the woman on the right is European American, and Steve in the middle.
Ladies, here we go. We've got the top 6 answers on the board. Name something you know about zombies. Kristen.
Black.
They're black. You shut up, lady. The black zombies.
Not only did that automatically jump out because of her implicit bias, but she dug in and said, I know it's up there, which is her sense of privilege, which is a microaggression, which we deal with all the time. How many times do you hear people say this? When I look at you, I don't see color. If they don't see color, they are erasing you. You have to see color because it's there and it's in front of you and you're seeing it with your own eyes. So for you to say something like that to a black person is not the right thing to do. The only race is the human race. It's just like Black Lives Matter. The retort is all lives matter. But at this very moment, all lives are not going through the same thing Black lives are. I'm not racist. I have black friends. We hear that all the time. And one thing that's important about the relationships that we have is that we said that at the beginning. This is not an adopt a black friend. This is Thomas, this is not about adopting a white friend. This is a whole different experience. As a woman, I know what you go through. No, you don't. And everyone can succeed if they work hard enough. We worked hard. We built this country. We're still not succeeding. So those are microaggressions. And that's something that I know all of you, I can see your faces, all of you have experienced.
We keep scanning the room whenever we show that video. We're just convinced that one of these days that woman is going
It's
to
going to be in
the
the
audience. And I'm not sure how to respond to her, that we've been using her for years now as a comic relief in all this heaviness.
That's the conversation you're going to have.
This is another one, and you'll get it from hearing it. The Ghost in Your Jeans was a film that was made by the BBC in 2006. And so the movie's about 12 years old, and it's talking about a science that's really only been around about 20, 25 years max, epigenetics. And it's what happens to our DNA. And so you'll be able to hear this, and it should make sense. And we can pause at the end if anybody has any questions, just a couple minutes long. And the whole movie is like 50 minutes, so you can watch it in an evening easy.
Everyone thought that any altered switches could not be inherited. He took some mice with altered gene switches and bred them.
Our expectation was that as the altered genome was passed to the children, that any epigenetic changes would be wiped clean.
When he looked at the gene profile of the offspring, he was amazed.
You had dots that you were looking at, and every dot means a gene is on. And all of a sudden, you know, somebody said, "Wow, look at that."
The epigenetic switch thrown in one generation was clearly also present in this second generation.
Nobody had seen this kind of thing before, so it was the first time. And all the people looking at the gel saying, "No, this can't be right, and it's the wrong gel." You know how you get excited about it, and then you think, "Oh, maybe this is wrong, and you're not on the right track." And we were very excited. As excited as scientists ever get.
This meant that the genes were not locked away. A simple environmental event could affect the way genes worked, and that could be inherited. As if a memory of an event was being passed down through generations. It was something many scientists regarded as impossible. If this effect could be observed in humans, the implications would be profound. It would mean that what we experience could affect not just us, but our children and our grandchildren.
This science has come a long way since this video was made, but it's important to know that in the testing that has led up to proving that epigenetics is a viable idea, they tested people whose ancestors were in the Jewish people whose ancestors were in concentration camps, and Japanese people who were interned in the concentration camps here in the United States, and by extension, African Americans whose ancestors endured slavery. So this science, like I said, has come a long way, but it has proven to be true. We react based on ancestral experiences, which explains a great deal about why me, as a genealogist, I will go places and have these triggers that happen that just amaze me. It's like, wow, why do I feel like this? We're driving through Alabama and Loudoun County, where my ancestors came from, and it's like I feel like I'm right there. And I'm having a similar, just a horrified reaction. So it really does, we do have a ghost in our genes. But it can be corrected, it's important to know. Just like those switches were flipped, we can flip them back. So it's important to know that, but it takes conscious effort.
Yeah, and they're making some great strides. There's some really wonderful books out there. Our particular focus is about trauma, historic trauma, and in relation to the legacy of slavery. But any sort of trauma, and as Sharon says, if it's not healed, it's getting passed on. It's physically in our DNA. And so when Sharon talks about our ability to heal ourselves, we're healing our children too. We're healing our grandchildren. And it's really powerful work. We're not scientists. We watched a video. But it's so obviously clear when you think about the history of this nation and the history of this world, how this stuff applies.
So how do we break the paradigm? That's the thing that everybody's looking for, because we really can't go on like this. Our inspiration for a lot of the work that we do, on one hand, and this is largely Sharon channeling Solomon Northup, there's a sin, a fearful sin, resting on this nation that will not go unpunished forever. There will be a reckoning, yes. It may be sooner or it may be later, but it's a coming, as sure as the Lord is great. And I believe that we are in the times of the reckoning. And without sounding religious, as Tom said, any trauma that remains unhealed continues to be a wound, and it continues to infect us. And if we don't solve this, it will be a wound that will carry on to future generations. So the urgency, as Dr. King said, is now. There is a fierce urgency to now, especially the political situation we're living in. And his dream is that we will all sit down together around the table of brotherhood. Thus, the name of the book, Gather at the Table, and thus much of the work that we do with the organization Coming to the Table. So what we did.
Anybody who's up close,
I know.
this is what it really looks like. And if you're in the back, if you've got binoculars. Anyway, so this is our encouragement to come sit in the front row.
There are 4 seats here, 2 seats right there.
So what we did, we both learned. I mean, Sharon's the genealogist. I'm kind of the puppy hopping along behind. But because I'm related to people who are really wealthy and white, a lot of the genealogy has been done. So I've been able to learn a lot and done a lot of research on my own for more recent generations. And Sharon today, is your cousin here?
There she is,
Yes.
I met a relative, the queen for Columbia Boone, just throwing out a wild card.
This happens to us more than you would imagine. I think the most distant I've met is a 10th cousin, the common ancestors like from the 1630s or something. So,
But unlike my research, when we started traveling, we went to one of Tom's relatives who has a printed book, who can Google ancestry all way back to the 1620s. I have had to spend 30 plus years digging up mine. I still don't have that. But that's what I will be writing in Mississippi when I go.
and here's another little special thing for me that would only happen to white people, is my great-grandmother got, I think it was a great-grandmother, could have been great-great, in Kentucky, got married when she was too young to be married, so she had to have permission from her father. The printed letter in his handwriting is in the county record book. I could have put it in my pocket and taken it with me. It was just sitting there loose. And I left it for the next person to steal. I just took a picture of it. But those kinds of, that's another one of those disparities, is Sharon's not going to find that kind of stuff. Hopefully, as time rolls on, her grandchildren will. But that was another one of our things that happen. I think let's skip this.
Because you have to be able to see.
You have to be able to see this.
Yeah.
This is, essentially, when we went on this trip, we spent a month in her car, Sharon and me and Nemo, her little dog, and our luggage. And we traveled through 21 states, 6,000 miles, going to cemeteries, courthouses, churches, museums, civil rights. I mean, we were in Money, Mississippi at what used to be Bryant's store. We went
Where Emmett Till was murdered.
Yeah, I mean, everywhere we went, we were looking for both the horror and the hope. And one of my favorite stories of the whole journey, and that's in this, will you tell them about the cemetery that we went to?
Leslie?
About, yeah, I mean, we couldn't find a cemetery, and here's another little thing, is I finally said, look, there's a pickup truck in that driveway. Let me go
This
knock
is
on.
Alabama. Baton Rouge, Alabama.
Wait, I mean, this is like rural country outside of Selma, but this is me, I just know, it's gonna be cool, I'm gonna go knock on the door and they're gonna tell me where this cemetery is. Sharon says, I'm staying in the car. And I go and knock on this door and I hear this little voice of this little boy, Mama, there's some man here. And I hear the rustling behind, and this woman opens the door wrapped in a towel. She'd gotten out of the shower to answer the door, but because of who I am, she feels safe enough to open the door. That never would have happened had Sharon been the one knocking on the door. There would have maybe been a rifle involved.
It was in the pickup truck.
And it was sitting in the gun rack in the pickup truck parked in the driveway. So, but she said, oh, I know just the cemetery. Go back there, hang a right, and it's da-da-da-da-da. It's this Bethel Baptist cemetery. And
So we get to the cemetery, which I had actually found 2 years previously. But the first time that I went there, I went with a family member who lives in Alabama. So we find this grave plots that are familiar. They have the Leslie surname. You see my name that I use is Leslie. That's my father's name. So I found this one tombstone that was turned over, so you couldn't see what was written on it. The man I was looking for wasn't on any of the ones that were upstanding. So it's like, this must be him. So I asked my relative, come on, help me turn this over. And he's like, oh, hell no. You see that white man on that trash George over there, he's just waiting. He's got a shotgun behind the seat. He's just waiting to see me try to turn over this tombstone so he can shoot me. So, So I had to wait 2 years to go there with Tom. So with Tom, I said, okay, we are looking for your ancestor. So if we see any white people out here, you're gonna make the claim, I'm here looking for my great-great-granddaddy, okay? Because they won't shoot you, and I'm just your little Negro helper. So, we did it, it was the tombstone, we turned it over, I carry a shovel in my car and boots when I do these trips. So we dug up the tombstone, turned it over, it was the guy, it's the white man who I believe was the father of my great-grandfather.
So where this all started for us, and really kind of the meat of what we wanted to talk about, we met at Eastern Mennonite University at a time neither one of us knew what a Mennonite was. But they have a university, and it's in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia. And they have within, in addition to training Mennonite ministers, they have the Center for Justice and Peace Building. And that's our connection. And that you don't have to be a Mennonite to be there. We've had classmates who are Christian, non-Christian, atheists, Buddhists, Muslims, Hindu, from all over the world. They've trained literally thousands and thousands of people from around the world. And their focus is on conflict transformation, restorative justice, trauma healing, equitable development, and addressing organizational conflict. And training. So the STAR program is Strategies for Trauma Awareness and Resilience. And their primary thing, this program started right after the World Trade Center attacks in 2001. And so it was a partnership between the Center for Justice and Peace Building and Church World Service, creating a program that would help people understand what trauma does and how to be resilient in the face of it. And it's training people who are actually traumatized, it's people who are supporting them, first responders, psychiatrists, ministers, counselors, on what to do. And their primary goal was being in war-torn countries and places around the world that are currently being traumatized. And I think there are up to like 8,500 people that have been trained now that are using this around the world to try and support people experiencing trauma. Our particular interest is historic trauma, and that's where this has come in for the work that we do. So cycles of violence is the key. It's understanding that hurt people hurt people. That's what violence is. It's always in reaction to something inside of me that is deeply wounded. And so a traumatic event takes place, and there's actual physiological changes that take place within the body. Shock, injury, fear, denial, things that, I mean, if it's an instant trauma, a car is about to hit you, the adrenaline, you're not going to think about this, it's just going to happen to you so that you can jump out of the way. And that's our body taking care of itself. It's right there in the brain stem, the oldest part of our brain. But acting in against ourselves, you know, there's panic involved. We suppress maybe our grief and our fears. We feel anger. Maybe, is there even a God? Spiritual questions. Maybe we survived and somebody else didn't, and we feel guilty about that. We can feel helpless. We may want to get revenge and have those kind of fantasies internally. Externally, we may want to attack others in the name of justice, deciding to pursue my own needs at the expense of other people, dehumanizing the other, which we talked about earlier. And the way that these express themselves, acting out, you know, we see it at schools a lot in bullying, blaming other people. At home, it's domestic violence, spousal or child abuse, repetitive conflict, always getting into things. But inside, aimed at myself, is this sort of internalized, all the internalized stuff, the internalized oppression, fatalism, self-abuse, addictions, alcohol, drugs, work addictions, you know, working the 15-hour days, suicide, physical ailments, depression. And there's no coincidence that this is in the form of the infinity symbol, because we get caught up in these cycles and we stay in them and we don't heal, and that's where epigenetics comes in. Because the way that I'm hurting, look at every child abuser who's in prison today was abused as a child, right? That's what we're faced with, is that we pass this stuff on to our kids, and they pass it on to their kids. And we do it externally, and now we know we're doing it within our own DNA, the stuff that's getting triggered. So that's where this being resilient is so important, is finding ways that within these cycles of violence, that there is a way out. There are things that we can do to break free. It's acknowledgement and it's reconnection. It involves mourning and grieving sometimes, memorializing things, or trying to tear down statues that are memorializing things that are traumatizing people. Being committed to taking risks, practicing tolerance, engaging the offender. It might be choosing to forgive, recognizing that as long as I'm not forgiving, I'm tearing myself up. I might as well be drinking rat poison. So that the forgiveness isn't all about being this magnanimous person to someone else. It's helping me to break free of the thing that is keeping me all tied up. Establishing justice, holding people accountable, that's part of this too. And recognizing that it is important that we hold each other and ourselves accountable for transgressions. And frankly, it's integrating into a sort of a new vision of the world what I've lost, and because it's part of me. And so how do I use that? And then at the very end, the possibility of reconciliation. We sort of take issue with the word reconciliation, because in this country, to reconcile means that you were together at one time. And so you're reconciling. And it's never been that way. But reconciling with our true humanity, with the deepness of our hearts, our ultimate interconnectedness, mostly we talk about now as transformation. And I will tell you, as a white man, I like to skip all this other stuff and go right to there. How can I get rid of my pain and feel better as quickly as possible? How can I get rid of the way I feel guilty about the kind of history that my ancestors were involved in? How can I avoid the shame and the way that that makes me feel as much as possible? Because one thing we're great at in this country is shame. We're really good at making other people feel like crap, which is another form of aggression and putting trauma onto somebody else. And so this program, they teach it 3 or 4 times a year, highly recommended. The STAR program you just put STAR at EMU and you'll find out information about this program. And there's people that travel around and teach it. 1-day seminars, 2-day week. Sharon and I have both been through STAR 1 and STAR 2, and both of those are week-long, 5-day, all-day programs. Really, really powerful stuff. And at the base of it, I asked this earlier today, and I want to ask again this evening, do people here know about Our Joy in Oakland, Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth? A few people have. Fania Davis founded this. Fania Davis is the younger sister of Angela Davis, and they grew up in Birmingham. Fania was best friends with 2 of the little girls that died at the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing, and Fania is just a real powerful proponent of all of this work. And the Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth is going into schools, working with at-risk kids, obviously mostly kids of color. And they have radically changed dropout rates, graduation rates, success rates for kids going to college. It's really an amazing program, and it takes the dedication to do it. It takes the dedication, the time, commitment. I mean, I watched a little bit of the Olympics last night, and I think of all the work that like Lindsey Vonn has put into being the amazing skier that she is. What if we all put that much effort into undoing racism in our nation? That's the kind of commitment that we're talking. So coming to the table is based on all of these principles of trauma awareness, of restorative justice. And I want to explain just a little bit more. Restorative justice. Criminal justice asks, something bad just happened, who did it and what do they deserve? That's essentially criminal justice system. Restorative justice goes much further, asking who all has been harmed, including the perpetrator, and looking deeply at connections to family members, friends, other people who are impacted. Then the other question is, what needs to happen in order for us to make this as whole, as healed as possible? If someone has been murdered, you're not bringing them back to life. But to the degree possible, what can we do to work towards healing? And who all has responsibility to help make that happen? And it's a real community effort. It's a huge deal. So coming to the table is based in all of this, the vision of a just and truthful society that acknowledges and seeks to heal from the racial wounds of the past. And the four sort of pillars with this umbrella of restorative justice and trauma healing is being really honest and open about the full history of our nation, uncovering all of it, and being honest about it. And that's individual history, community history, as well as our national and world history. Building connections with people that we have thought of as the other. And whoever that may be, honest, accountable, authentic relationships with other people. It takes time. I don't know why Lindsey Vonn has become all of a sudden a poster child for this, but it takes that kind of commitment, you know, for somebody to spend their life devoted to, what if we do devote our lives to being the most whole and kind and loving and healed people that we could be. So we work towards healing by any means necessary. Whatever helps you to heal. Maybe it's prayer, maybe it's art, maybe it's music, making music, maybe it's meditation or yoga, and a combination of all of these things, but finding ways to work together in community towards healing, and then taking action to undo systems of oppression. And that's really hard work. You know, we're here because of the Black Infant Health Program at Santa Clara County Health Department. Now, can we imagine a health department, I'm going to guess, because I don't know, but I'm going to guess that most of the people at the very top of most of the structures look a lot like me. Is that very accurate?
Yeah.
I haven't been mistaken too often in this whole country making a statement like that, because white males, Christian, able-bodied, straight, typically are still running everything. Even, I had a friend point out to me, he says, even South Africa, politically it's all the black people, but who owns everything? Right? And money is the power, as we all know. So, taking action to undo those systems within a hierarchical structure like a government is really tough work. How honest do you want to be with a person about racism within the organization that they run if they have the power over your livelihood? Right? So it takes commitment top to bottom in these systems, and it's the work. That's the work. Coming to the table is, I work half-time for this organization as executive director. And for 6 more months, I've announced my retirement because I want to spend more time writing and with grandchildren. But this organization has one half-time staff person. We have 13,000 people looking at the website every month. We have 4,500 people in the Facebook group. We got 2,000 people getting the newsletter. We have 24 local affiliate groups. The closest one to here is in Oakland. And it's just growing by leaps and bounds. There's where all the local affiliate groups are located, and we've got all these working groups. All of this done by volunteers. Nobody's being paid to do any of this stuff. We just had, our reparations working group has spent 3 years putting together the most fabulous paper guide on reparations under groups on the Coming to the Table website. You'll see reparations working group, and the reparations guide is in there. And it's an invitation. Look at what you can do individually or collectively to work towards repair for the legacy of slavery. And it just came out last month. The meditation and mindfulness working group uses meditation as a healing tool and sponsors monthly community conference calls and their guided meditations dealing with healing of racism, the wounds of racism, with people on the phone together from all over the country. Sharon.
So what I do, I'm a volunteer for Coming to the Table. I'm the national chairperson for organizing the gathering that we're going to have in June, which we have every 2 years. But my passion is genealogy. So what I do is our Black ancestry. 10 years ago, I decided that I had learned enough about doing genealogical research that I wanted to help other African American people be able to do that. So I founded our Black ancestry. We now have, we are a web portal, so we only operate online, but we operate like a genealogy society. So we have 35,000 people on Facebook. And what happens is that it's a peer research community. So that if you're doing research, you can go and get the links and the resources and everything off the website. And in the Facebook group, if you have questions or need help, people will jump in and help you. So there's a tutorial on the website, and there's a huge amount of information that is specifically geared toward African American ancestry. But it is important to know that everybody can be part of this group, and we need everybody because most African American records reside in white records. So you get to a certain point, the 1870s federal census, which is the first one where African Americans even had a public surname, then you need to go into slaveholder records and figure out where your people came from, where they got their names, and to reconstruct their lives. So the Facebook community helps tremendously with being able to do that. And the idea is that I want to try to reunite as many African descended people as possible from wherever we are. Eventually we can do this internationally, and we have a lot of people who are either from African countries or from Caribbean countries. So it is really beginning to expand to that level. So the end of all of this, well, the end of this part of the presentation, is that at the conclusion of Writing Gathered at the Table, we really devoted a lot of thought to, okay, we took this journey, it didn't have to work. It did. We were wondering whether we could prove this model. We did. We ended up with a friendship, and we ended up with being able to transform in some really important ways individually. What are we going to suggest to other people? It can feel overwhelming if you look at the problems in the world, and you look at racism, and you look at the systemic inequity, and you look at the social determinants. It can be absolutely overwhelming to think about what can I do, because you want to make a very large change. But the reality that we came to is that we can only do small things. But if everyone in this room took one small thing, how much is that multiplied? Just look at the size of this room. If you, everybody, that adds up to 50 things, which is then a bigger thing, which is then a bigger thing. So what we have to do is start with the ripple on the pond. And you know when you throw a rock into the water, and it has these ever-expanding waves, so that's the image that we wanted to use. Because if many people commit to doing that one thing that they are passionate about, we really can make a difference in this world. We're making a difference right now here in San Jose. So we urge everyone to find that thing and to dedicate yourself to it.
And you know, and what Sharon talks about with the power that we have individually and collectively. She talked earlier about we can change our DNA. That's no joke. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score that talks exactly about it. The first half of the book is all devoted to trauma and what it does to us. And the second half is all the ways that we have available to us to heal, to change. And so much of it begins right here. That our thoughts create our lives. If I fill my mind with thoughts of horrible things, I'm going to attract horrible things. If I concentrate on beautiful, loving things, I'm going to attract more beautiful and loving things. We have this control. When we're done here tonight, and we do have a few books here, you'll also see some DVDs of The Secret, which if you haven't seen it, these are free. These are for whoever would like them, and if you have somebody that you want to give it to, do it. I bought 200 of these to give away because some guy was getting rid of them all. I just had to pay shipping. And it's not a perfect movie. To me, it's too much focus on getting a great house and a great car. But when you focus on the power of our thoughts, and because we can change our dreams, we can change our instincts, we can change our future. When we talk about this 7th generation, someone mentioned it earlier today, 7 generations back. That's what this stuff is all about. 7 generations in both directions. So this healing is powerful stuff that we don't fully understand. So anybody who would like 1 or 2, feel free.
So our takeaway is that, as we can see, as evidenced by tonight, a lot of the problems in the world would disappear if we would just talk to each other instead of at one another. The communication is a two-way street. And then, John Lewis, sometimes you have to get in the way. You have to make some noise by speaking up and speaking out against injustice and inaction. So that's what we're trying to do. And I hope that we're encouraging you to do likewise. So these are the websites. You can Google it. You don't really have to have the website address. You can just Google the name and a lot of stuff can pop up very easily. Because we're the only ones out there doing this. So thank you. We'd like to entertain questions, comments. If you have some, we have to save some time because we'll sign books up here. So you can talk to us individually, but if there's something that you would like to share with the group, now would be the time.
So I'm just really curious, when you found out about your family history, like how did you feel about what your family has done, and is that what led you to do what you're doing right now?
It absolutely did. I didn't know any of this stuff until I was in my late 40s.
Okay.
My kids were grown. I mean, I grew up in Southern California, and my grandfather died when my dad was 2. So if he knew anything, there's nobody to pass it on.
Right.
And his grandfather died when his dad was 2, so you had 2 generations where little babies lost their dads. They're the direct connection. And so I don't know if they would have known, but this was a complete and utter surprise. I had a guy come, I had a restaurant in the town where I live, and it was near the fire hall, and one of the firemen came up and said, I think we might be related. My dad's middle name is DeWolf. And it turned out that we were, and his dad was a genealogist. And my wife and I, when we got married, went, and the first night of our honeymoon, we stayed with my friend Dave's parents. And he started telling me stories, and I thoughtfully turned on a tape recorder. So all these stories about famous people that were related to, you know, like the guy that wrote Moby Dick,
Yes.
Herman Melville, Drew Barrymore, her great aunt was married to a DeWolf, and I've written to Drew like a dozen times. I've got the largest collection of autographed pictures of Drew Barrymore on the planet. But he also, in the midst of that, said, oh, and then there were the slave traders, rum runners, and privateers. So that was in '86, but it wasn't until the year 2000 when Dave came up and started talking to me. When Dave came up with an invitation to go on this trip, and then it was like, wait, what are you talking about? And that's when I found out all of this. And so the first thing I do, I'd never been out of this continent before. I've been to Tijuana and Banff. That's my international experience. And I'm flying to Ghana and Cuba.
Oh, wow.
And it was mind-blowing and the best thing that's ever happened in my life. I mean, without it, I certainly wouldn't be here. I'd just be in where I live, Lily White Bend, Oregon. 94% white people, just playing with my grandkids, going to the beach. Instead, I hang out with Sharon Morgan.
Which is a lot more fun than that.
because that's what has been really, really on my heart, especially since this new rise in white supremacy and anti-Semitism, anti-immigrant, and you know, we have so many people coming to this country from other places who don't know anything about the history of slavery, and that this country is founded on stolen land and stolen labor. And that, you know, I do think that we need to build a structure that acknowledges that and also helps in some way stabilize the families that were affected. But the other thing that I think is important, which tell me if I'm wrong, you know, most of the other countries that have gone through this reconciliation, like South Africa, I mean, they had some process, and this country has never had that process. And I think that's one of the things that's missing. And I see that you're doing it individually and collectively, and that's wonderful, but do you ever envision doing it as an entire country?
Elevating that up a step, the Kellogg Foundation has a new, you'll have to talk about it, Tom, because you've been more involved because you serve on the committee. But the Kellogg Foundation is doing something pretty exciting.
Yeah, so absolutely yes. During the Clinton administration, for those of us who were alive back then and not toddlers here, during the Clinton administration, they made that attempt to have a national dialogue on race. And I will tell you, I think most people would say it was a noble effort that didn't do anything. We have a friend in Denver, Colorado that went to it. And they started meeting, they said, let's have a meeting next month and see what we can do subsequent to that. So that was in 1996. They're still meeting every month, and they have 80 to 100 people who show up in Denver to these meetings, and they've broken off, they've got like white affinity groups, white people dealing with their own racism without asking black people to help fix them. And yes, our goal is a national truth and reconciliation. So what Kellogg has just launched, like a multi-million-dollar, multi-year effort that they've started in 14 communities around the country. I don't know if there's any in the Bay Area, but I know that Los Angeles is one. And it's called Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. And the whole thing is designed around this, to spur this idea that we need this national, not just dialogue, but transformation. That we're not trying to reconcile back to making America great again. What we're trying to do is transform into the ideals that really recognize that our humanity is tied together, and that we're holding each other up equally and lovingly. So the reparations guide is one effort by a group of people that's reached out. I mean, one of them went, Coming to the Table didn't pay for this. She went to the NCOBRA conference this last year to talk with them and meet with them. And it's a tough discussion, because NCOBRA doesn't feel like white people should be part of that conversation at all. And she had people paying close attention. She's an African-American woman who went to this, who chairs this reparations committee. And so this is recognizing reparations in a big way. Because there's a lot of people who look like me who would say, oh, so you want me, who never owned anybody, to write a check to somebody who has never been owned? And this is looking at repair in yes, huge financial investment, but it's education. It's transforming the criminal justice system so that it's equitable. It's sentencing laws. It's all of it. And so this is what individuals can do, communities can do, and nationally under the 4 pillars: history, healing, connecting, and action. And I think you'll find it a really impressive document that a group of volunteers put together. There's so many resources on the Coming to the Table website. Transforming Historical Harms Manual, building communities, connecting with linked descendants, because a lot of this work, like, Sharon was talking about genealogically, Coming to the Table started because of the descendants, black and white, of Thomas Jefferson and the big Hairston plantation families. So you've got the Sallys and the Marthas from Jefferson, who were working together, and they got together with the Harrisons and started this whole thing. Like, talk about a different view of a family reunion.
I have a question for Sharon. I'm curious about your tracing your genealogy, how far back you went, and if you had any discoveries that kind of surprised you or were.
My root story is, I was researching my ancestress, whose name was Betty. I thought her name was Betty Gavin. And she had 17 children with a nephew of her owner. But I didn't have all those details. I
Wait,
just
she
had a
had
name.
17 children with her nephew?
She had with the nephew of her owner.
Oh, with the nephew, the owner.
Okay, so my mother gave me her name, and she said her name is Betty Wolf, and she's Native American, which every African American family has this story. And it has turned out that her first owner likely was a man named John Wharf. She ended up being owned by the Gavins, by Alan Gavin, and Alan Gavin's nephew, he had a relationship of some kind with Betty for 38 years, and they had 17 children. So I set out to discover all those 17 children. So I can trace the white people back to 1691, when they arrived in America from Barbados. Because, this is a very interesting fact, after Europeans exhausted the Caribbean islands, that is when there was an influx of people settling in America. So they had already done the islands, and they came here looking for more land, more people, more wealth. So that's the white side. For the African American side, I can now get back to 1820 on both sides of the family. So I have names back that far, but I don't have a lot of details about the people. The thing that really pushed me in this direction, I now have many more than a dozen people, ancestors who I can name who were enslaved. When I was a child, I had a great-great-grandmother who was alive. She died in 1954 when she was 104 years old. I was born in 1951, so I was too young to talk to her. But my father finally had told me, you know, she was a slave. So this woman who I've lived in my lifetime, that I can actually remember and I have pictures of, that connection made it clear to me how slavery is living, because she was living and I'm still living. So that memory is not gone. And that was a huge inducement for me to get involved in this research. So yeah, and the surprising things, I found out so many surprising things. That would take another presentation.
I'm mixed up. I was born in 1941, and my mother was in Chicago, but she gave me to my grandparents to raise in Frisco, Oklahoma. My grandfather had a third grade education, and he was this far removed from slavery. And he taught me that I am no better than anybody else, and nobody else is any better than me. Now, I've learned that that's not true. But I still, when it's convenient, I still think that way. Help me.
In what way?
Well, I came here to California. I was recruited by IBM because they needed a minority female. And I tested them. And back in those days, a lot of times I was the only black. And that has helped me, you know. I know better than anybody else. Nobody else is any better than me. But listening to you two, it's like, that's not true.
Why is that not true? I think the point is that everybody, human beings are equal. Race is a social construct, really. Scientifically, it is. It's something that socially has been developed as a means to other people. so that you can look down on somebody because they're black. White people can say, I'm the greatest because you are the worst. I'm on the top because you're on the bottom. But the reality is that all human beings are equal. We are all human beings. So anything else that we use to define ourselves is making the imbalance. If you're the only black person working somewhere, and I've been in situations like that, you have been chosen for whatever their reasons are, but you probably had to work harder. As my parents used to say, you have to run faster, jump higher, work harder, just to stay in place. You know, so the reality is that we're all even in God's eyes, in the, you know, if things were in the ideal world. But the way our society works is that it's not like that. It isn't even. So I think that's what we're trying to say, and I hope that that's a message that has come through.
Now I wonder, when I have said that to someone, if they're thinking, what are you talking about,
You know, and yeah, and how do we enter into the kind of relationships where we can dig deeply into what those feelings are? The feelings that you got from your grandfather, how those implicated you in how you've grown all these years since. What are the good feelings about it? What are the not so good feelings about it? What are the confusing feelings about it? That's the work. So how do we, you know, it's like so much of what we teach in school are subjects. We're good at teaching math and science. We're so good. We're not great at any of it, for the most part. We're really not very good at history. What we're horrible at is humanity, relationships, love. How many people took a class in love in school? I sure never did. I had the sex education thing in about, I think, 4th and 5th grade. And so then, you know, all the way home you're calling, you know, the boys are on one side of the street and the girls on the other, and you're yelling at each other the names of these anatomical parts of the body that we all just learned for the first time. But did that teach me how to be in a respectful relationship with one of these little girls? No. You know, the sarcasm that we toss at each other that causes us pain? No. That to me, that's what this work is. And when I talk about a national truth, healing, you know, racial healing and transformation, this is the work. It's not going to be some president or congressman who's going to make this happen. It's going to be because you all decided that tonight was worth being here for some reason, and maybe you weren't sure what it was. But
You have something to say.
I have a question regarding the basis for the racism. Is it out of fear? You know, they're always in a hierarchical relationship that's been since time immemorial. Even in the garden, discrimination was in the Garden of Eden. The serpent chose Eve, right? So Adam was saying, well, what?
I think Adam wrote the book, though.
What you want? You discriminate, why did you come to me? I mean, it started there. You have to take it
Around the man.
Yeah. What I'm saying, since that, all the way through history, there's been this, those that are in power want to stay in power. And they're going to do whatever. My army is bigger than yours, then I'm in charge. And I'll enslave you, I'll do whatever I want to do, all through history. So it's been with us that time. So as we come to this point in life, it has improved. But there's still a group that's in charge. And you guys right now are the ones that's running the place. You got all the economics, you hire, you fire, you do all these things. We grow. You know, we try, gee, I just hope I get that job. And then they'll hire me because they're going to make more money. You know, because at the time you could discriminate. I wanted to see integration in the workplace, right? So let me go back and get a few of these guys so I can continue to get my money, get more money. I'm justified. So it's that fear that we're going to take over. Is it that part of it? The fear factor, that I'm gonna lose my superiority if I give in to look at everybody as being equal, am I gonna displace, you know, the groups that are in charge?
I think that you may even go deeper than that. If anybody is familiar with the ISIS papers, Dr. Frances Cress Wilson, she wrote the theory of color confrontation and race. And her premise is that white people are afraid of basically losing themselves because they are in the minority worldwide. And if they have a relationship with a person of color, they won't be white anymore. And if they give up their power, they won't have power or money anymore. But they are at so many disadvantages that they have to be on the offensive to keep other people from getting what they've got. And she lost her professional career because of writing this paper. And now it's really old. I think it came out in the late 70s. But that was the best explanation that I ever heard. And as I see the things that are unfolding right now, this is such a vicious back against the wall type of fight. It is like, wow, where did this come from? And that's been one of the few things that has helped me understand that.
And I think you're right, though. I think it is fear. I mean, what was that movie with Robert Mitchum where he had love and fear? I mean, it's not love and hate, it's love and fear.
Cape Cod.
Because you're on,
Cape Fear.
I don't think that's the movie, but I could stand corrected. I think that's a different message in Cape Fear. But the concept of either we're living in love, which involves trust, respect, kindness. You know, I want you to be the best you that you want to be, and I want the same for me. I want the same for you. Or if you get yours, am I gonna? You know, we live in this fear of lack. That there's not enough for everybody, so I need to get mine, instead of recognizing. So yeah, I think it is fear. Somebody, was it you that knows Juanita Brown? Yeah, so Juanita, I'm gonna quote Juanita now. She's a African-American woman who lives here in the Bay Area, and she was the producer of our film, Traces of the Trade. And one of the things that she said, and this is actually a piece that was in the film, she's not in the movie very much. But this was a piece where she talked about what this work is. She said, I could be really, really angry, and I am, but the whole point of this work is about liberation. It's about the liberation of my people, and it's about the liberation of you guys, she said. And that's what I tell people when they ask why I do this. What's in this for me? It sure would have been a hell of a lot easier to just live my life out in Bend, Oregon, oblivious to all of this stuff. But this is liberation. I can be in groups of people that are very different from me and not be afraid. And not get hung up on my own guilt and shame. Because we do the work to work through that stuff and get past that kind of fear. And the more you do the work, the easier, like with anything. You practice something over and over again, it becomes permanent. That's what practice does, that repetition, it becomes your instinct. So is your instinct going to be creating more fear? Or is it going to be creating more equity and justice and love and kindness in our world?
Oh, could I ask, and it was something that resonated that Sharon shared in the earlier session today about one of your great-grandmothers, or both of them, in the sense that they were white per se, because they were Italian.
I grew up in a household with a white grandmother.
Okay.
Who, her family, they were Scots-Irish.
Oh, okay.
And she married a black man in 1926.
Okay.
And they disowned her. And then my father, his stepmother, his mother died, his biological mother died, and his father married an Italian woman, who I also spent my summers with her. And she didn't like white people. She didn't have any white friends. And she gave reasons. She told me things about history that I'd never known before. Like one of the, there was this really famous lynching that happened in New Orleans, where this Italian person was that they went on a rampage against the Italians. Italians were considered white.
Well, yeah,
It
that's
took a
right.
while to evolve into being accepted as white.
Well, it's that whitewashing of America,
Yeah, I
right?
mean, when
So
you look at the history, you people who come from Europe, even the Irish, they weren't white.
Yeah.
No.
And it took a while for them to be acculturated and then brought into the fold as white people.
And almost they had to deny strict whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
cultural-
You still have the black Irish.
Yeah, and is that sort of tied to the healing process too, that somehow, like, are there,
There's a
not
book by
necessarily.
Nell Painter that's called The History of White People. And it talks about a lot of this, about how all of this evolved and the society finally
It was
came to be.
intentional,
So
right?
that now it's like white people. And it used to not be. There were national identities just like everybody else.
But is that maybe part of the healing process, that was actually kind of institutionalized, is that?
Well, I think it was
discussion
part of
that-
adding to the ranks, so that you have more and more white
Oh,
people.
yes, no, definitely, but hold on, I think in part
Oh,
of
the
the
other
healing
side of
process
it.
now. Yes, yeah,
Okay.
to maybe help, maybe get more white allies, to let them know even that was kind of, that was intentional.
Yeah,
you
because
know.
that is information that
Yes.
most people don't have.
No, right?
And if you ask an American today,
Well, yeah, what cultures
what
do
they,
they have?
and people used to not say that. It's like, I'm Irish, I'm Italian, I'm, whatever. And now it's like white is such a default that question never gets asked.
Well, and I think that is something that is part of the trauma that white people in this country have also experienced, because they lost their history. They lost and many of them have to, I've known people who said, I'm American, I'm not.
But the reward that they got
Well, they
is
may have
that now
gotten a
they are
material,
white.
they may have gotten a material reward, but there's still a spiritual angst. They've lost.
If you read the book White Cargo,
Hmm.
it's a book about indentured servants.
Yes.
So many, if not
Exactly.
most, there were only a couple of hundred people who came on the Mayflower.
Exactly.
And the other, whatever the other boat was.
Mhm.
And there were thousands that came as indentured servants. And these were white people, and they were
That's right.
primarily Scots-Irish. And they had been indentured
Exactly.
maybe in the islands, in the Caribbean islands.
That's it.
And then they could come to America and get a head right, to get a head start, and then they became the slave owners. And the same cruelty
can
that
I-
was inflicted on them, they inflicted on the people that they enslaved.
But you've raised the question of indentured servants. So actually, they were equal to slaves, and it wasn't until a court
Until
case.
slavery
they
was
be-
codified in law
Right,
as race
through a
related,
through a court case. But what
which happened in the 1600s,
actually, I'm not sure,
the
but
late
anyway,
1600s.
Dr. David Bly from Yale is an expert on this, and it hits home with me because from my mother's background, she's descended both from the slave owner, but she's also descended from the white indentured servants. And Dr. Bly talks about how there were love relationships between the slaves and the indentured servants. And that's not something we,
Part of
even
the
black
reason
people
that
acknowledge. or
slavery
recognize.
was codified in the way that it was, is that there was a large amount of interracial relationship. And in order to stop that, you had to make it illegal for one
Right.
of those parties to be part of that type of
Right, that's
relationship.
right, and
So
that's,
it started being codified into law in the late 1600s.
and that's a
And that was a
loss.
large part of the,
So we need to wrap up. I do want to say, though, you raised a really good point. Yes, white people are traumatized. It's different, but the woundedness is spread throughout all of us. And it comes from different places. Anytime there's a crime committed, there's wounds on the part of the perpetrator as there are wounds on the part of the victim in that particular thing. And this is also true. So this is it's not just the liberation of white people, it's the healing of white people too. And sure, I've covered up with bluster and privilege and any other way that we use to preserve ourselves and preserve our sanity. But these wounds are really deep. And the one thing I guess I would ask is that, I said this earlier today, if 6 months from now what we've talked about tonight is a dot on your life's roadmap, then this really isn't worth very much. It's what you do tomorrow, what step you take the next day, and the next day? Are you interested in getting together with a group of 3 or 4 or 6 or 12 people in this community, in your church, in your place of work, and have this kind of conversation once a month, once every 2 weeks, to really dig deep into our woundedness, our collective and individual woundedness, and what we can do about it? That's really what this work about. It's not gathering at the table, it's staying at the table. That's the work.
So thank you. We're going to sit here and sign books if you like. And
Thank you.